With the technology of electric vehicles still advancing, will the current crop of EVs become obsolete? Are we buying into something that will become worthless in just a few years' time? Stay with me to consider this today. Electric vehicles are currently quite technology laden. I think that's largely a side effect of market conditions. Early adopters have tended to be fairly tech-savvy customers, so manufacturers have leaned into that by loading the cars with tech. There's nothing fundamental about an EV that requires this level of technology, but it's been a tool to attract the buyers able to pay the upfront cost premium that new EVs currently carry. All technology constantly evolves, and in the technology world, we are used to an arms race of ever-increasing sophistication. Ever new features to encourage us to part with our money and buy the latest and greatest. This combination of a very technology-laden car, in combination with an understanding of how fast it evolves, leads some to worry. Will the cars we are buying now quickly become obsolete and worthless? Are we building a disposable fleet, one which needs regularly upgrading? It's surely a very valid question. After all, there is no environmental benefit if we scrap cars because they are no longer in vogue. They no longer represent the new and shiny. Certainly our disposable culture around consumer electronics are doing the planet no good. There are two slightly separate aspects to this that we need to consider. The first is user features. That is technology for us to interact with on a daily basis, such as the sat-nav, driver aids, telematics and remote access. And that's separate to the tech under the car's skin that makes it function, the things that make it move. Items such as the motors, control electronics and the battery chemistry. It does feel at the moment that we're in the relatively early days of the drive system. Modern lithium-ion based electric cars have only been commercially available for about 15 years. And manufacturers are racing to improve their offerings. Certainly what we've seen in the last 10 years is a dramatic improvement in the driving range of the cars available to us. This is largely because of improvements to the energy density of the batteries, coupled with a reduction in the cost of battery manufacture. If improvements continue at this pace, then cars of the future will be ever more to people's liking, either having greater range, or available at a lower upfront cost, or probably some combination of both. If things are going to get better, then why would we buy an EV now? Surely the cars we have now will become obsolete, they will become worthless, and we will have wasted our money. I can certainly understand that mindset. It seems to make a lot of sense on the surface, but maybe there's a flaw in the argument. I think that might become obvious if we reframe the question a bit. Let's take a step back for the moment. Why do we have a car? What is it for? Well, for most people, we buy or lease a car to get places. The car exists. Its very reason for being is to transport us from A to B. Based on our transportation needs, we choose a car, something the size we need, which gets us where we want to go with minimum fuss. An EV is one of the options to fulfill those needs, and for the majority of people, they fulfill them really well. Assuming your needs don't change, they will probably continue to do so for a long time to come. There will be new battery chemistries coming. Those chemistries will probably offer different balances between range, charging speed, efficiency, cost and lifetime. But they won't make what we have obsolete. You might choose to upgrade to get some new perceived benefit, but you will not be required to. What we buy now will still deliver pretty much what they delivered when they were new. The same attributes that you looked for when buying in the first place. Besides a bit of degradation, that is, which we know about in advance. Otherwise, they'll just keep on trucking. How do we know that? Well, that's already the case. The early lithium-ion cars, like the early Leaf and the original Renault Zoe, offer very limited range. Because of those limitations, they were of use to a subset of people. They were not cars that everyone would choose to buy back then. Even so, despite all of the advancements since, there is still value in those old cars. All you need do for reassurance is look at your preferred second-hand car listing site. In the UK, the most obvious of those is Auto Trader. And we can see plenty of old Leaf and Zoe up for sale there, which are happily bought by people whose needs can be fulfilled by them. Generally, I'd say that future enhancements to the drivetrain are not a concern. Just as with an ICE car, a newer car might be more desirable. It might offer better economy, be quieter, or offer some new feature you like, but that doesn't make the old cars worthless. However, there is one area that I think we do need to consider, one area of obsolescence that could be a threat, but it's not part of the drivetrain. Early in March 2024, early Nissan Leaf owners started to receive emails from Nissan warning them of imminent loss of some functionality. With less than 1 month's notice, they would lose the ability to use functionality via their mobile app. Cars using the Nissan Connect app, those built before 2016, would no longer be able to trigger remote preconditioning, control the charge level, or see the status of the car. These are nice features of an EV, and consumers were rightly a bit miffed. After all, they bought cars with a feature that was now being removed. And what's more, they were given very little notice. The text of the email said that Nissan were discontinuing the app because of the sunsetting of the 2G mobile network. They seemed to be saying it was out of their hands. There was nothing they could do. The trouble is, this doesn't entirely make sense. The 2G network is being sunsetted, but not yet. Indeed, it's expected to limp on into the mid-2030s, as there's a whole load of infrastructure dependent upon it in the UK. There are, for example, a lot of parking payment meters that use 2G to function, and probably a bunch of EV chargers to boot. So 2G can't be sunsetted yet, not by a long way. What was switched off this year was the majority of the 3G mobile network. Could it be that someone put the wrong network name in the email? That is possible, although a couple of 3G networks, namely EE and Vodafone, switched off their networks here in the UK in January and February, not April, and the others are mostly still on just at the moment. However, I think there's another possibility. These original Nissan Leaf used something called the Car Wings service. If we look back at the early press releases about the Leaf, we see that the system was developed by a company called Airbiquity. The work was done in collaboration with Hitachi Automotive Systems, and the press release from the original launch is available from Hitachi servers. But it looks like Airbiquity might have owned the intellectual property. It was probably their idea. It looks like Airbiquity specialised in this automotive telematics, providing solutions for multiple OEMs. But they were acquired by Karma Automotive on, wait for it, the 28th of February 2024. That's an interesting date, isn't it? So the company behind the telematics system were acquired in late February, and owners started getting emails in early March that the service would be shutting down. That's probably pretty relevant. The press release says that Karma acquired the technology assets and intellectual property. In addition, they hired key technical employees and assumed the software company's significant OEM contracts. And I reckon Nissan got caught up in that. At first, I wondered if Karma had maybe tried to renegotiate the contract with Nissan and failed. But actually, the timescales are very compressed, and I think it's probably simpler than that. If Karma are shutting down the Airbiquity offices and networks, the servers running the Nissan service might have needed moving or upgrading, and it simply wasn't worth doing that. Nissan probably weren't given any choice. What we've learned about Japanese companies recently is that saving face is very important to them. The story about 2G was probably written to avoid any embarrassment associated with a third-party company ending their support. There is some good news for these early Nissan Leaf owners. A third-party support network for early electric cars has sprung up over the years, and an open source solution was created some time ago, which might help Leaf owners. OVMS, the Open Vehicle Monitoring System, has been created by a group of open source developers, and a hardware plugin exists for the Leaf that can be used to add back some functionality. For a couple of £100, it's possible to buy a piece of hardware that connects to the car and use the app of that to control a few of the car's features, although you would have to pay for a SIM card to get a data connection away from your home. Note that in some manufacturers' cars, they've made the CAN bus read-only at the OBD2 port, as there is a gateway added to protect the car from external tampering. Therefore, in some manufacturers' cars, it may only be possible to read values and not issue commands. However, I believe the Leaf is capable of doing commands. This is not a particularly cheap solution for an old car, but if it's functionality that matters to you, there might be options to maintain it. And OVMS supports lots of cars, so this also applies to other owners of other manufacturers' cars should this happen again. In summary, we're likely to see improvements in the drivetrains of future EVs. However, those improvements do not make the older cars obsolete. The original cars will continue to do what they always did, save for a little reduction in range from degradation. We can see from the second-hand market that there is still value in all of the cars made by well-known manufacturers. History shows that we need not be worried about drivetrain improvements. If obsolescence was going to happen, it already would have done so. What is more susceptible to falling out of date is the data connections the cars use to offer additional features. As mobile data networks age and are replaced, we might lose remote access functions. However, third-party solutions exist to enable upgrades and extended support for those wanting to do so. Where a market exists, a solution is likely to appear to fulfill the need. It might be that you can step away from manufacturer tie-ins and yet retain these enjoyable features. Indeed, if manufacturers start to charge excessive monthly subscriptions, we might want to do that anyway. And finally, remember that app integration isn't limited to EVs. There are plenty of ICE cars that offer additional features via a mobile app as well. This isn't a problem brought about by the electric drivetrain, but instead by the increased connectedness of cars in general. Thanks very much for joining me. Your questions and comments on this subject are most welcome. Are you an owner of one of those early Nissan Leaf that was affected? If you've liked the video, then it's a help to me if you click the thumbs up button. And it would also help me achieve my stretch goal for the channel if you would subscribe as well. Thanks.